Let's go for a walk. This is
Let's do it.
Matt Crane, founder of MGMT Boston.
Yes. You could be the CEO of a one-person
Yes.
company, but that is a little pretentious.
Yeah, founder and CEO, we'll say, of MGMT Boston, which is a media project that showcases the best Boston-based startup and its brilliant minds. Matt, it's great to have you. Are you ready to dive into your journey?
Excited. Thank you for having me. Thank you to Jason Burke for connecting us.
Oh yeah, thank you very
He's the
much.
founder of
Jason.
All Stage and a great pillar in the Boston community. For context, I think it's important we call out, this is the coldest day of the year, November 2nd, year to date. It was 28 degrees this morning. It's about 40 for this walk, but we're out here, we're doing it.
Yes.
And that just shows our commitment to the grind.
Oh yeah, this is the commitment. And you may have noticed I wear the same flannel every single time, no matter what temperature it is.
I love it.
LL Bean makes some great stuff. So regulates, heats, it does that all. So Matt, thank
Free
you.
ad.
Yeah, free ad.
Free ad.
Thank you for joining me on this walk. And let's start at the beginning. Wellesley High School, class of 2006.
That's right.
What was life like for you growing up in the Boston area?
Well, we had, a desktop computer back in those days. I think, one of the cool parts about being back, so I know we'll get to this, but it's been about a year and a half that I've been back in Boston, is my sort of view of the professional world was so different in 2006. I always dreamed of being on Wall Street, and, sort of like more the white shoe profession was like what I thought was the destination for so many people. The startup world and the world of technology, had really not emerged in the mainstream way as it has today. So yeah, it was pretty different back then, I think I would say.
Mm-hmm. And what was life like for you in Wellesley?
Life was good. I'm the oldest of four, so we had a really busy house. And I went to school down in Providence, so I didn't travel too far. But yeah, I love growing up in Wellesley. And I think, as I reflect back, some of my classmates have gone on to do some really cool things. It was a really talented group. And I just think that speaks to the community, the schooling, and it's a good spot.
And what were you like going into college?
Ooh. I was I lost my identity in many ways. I was an athlete and I tore my ACL after I graduated from high school, but before I left. So we graduated at the beginning of June and then sports continued through June and I tore it then. So entering college, I had a knee brace, after ACL surgery, I was limping around. And then I never really competitively played again. So I sort of had to make that transition from athletics to a new path of academics and later business. So it was a transitional time, I would say.
And when did you decide that finance was the path for you?
So I was a finance major, probably my sophomore year. I kind of went in as a general business major and then transitioned to finance. And at the time, this was obviously pre-financial crisis heading into school. This is 2006, 2007 timeframe. That was just an industry that seemed really exciting and fast moving for my seat. And I really enjoyed learning about particularly the investing side of things, emerging businesses at the time. So that's what drew me to finance. And I really wanted to try a career on Wall Street. So that was sort of where I entered things. And then I was abroad my junior year in the fall of 2008 when everything, changed in many ways. I was in Ireland. Which was hit particularly hard by the financial crisis. So obviously I wasn't fully paying attention as a student, but it was a really interesting seat to kind of see how the world was rapidly changing.
And talk to me about when you first graduated from college. You talked about how you wanted to go to Wall Street. Where did you go and how did you end up there?
Yeah, so my first job was at Bank of America, which was great. I worked with a really cool group of people, but it was in their private banking group. So it was technically a retail position catering to individuals rather than institutions. Cool learning from that time that I look back on is that, these are people with a lot of assets and they all had super different ways. There was no single path to success, which I definitely took to heart at the time and still do. There's so many different ways, to find your way, which was really interesting. And then, obviously that path is to sort of become an advisor and then kind of build your book of business. It's not the same sort of career path from a, career ladder perspective. And I think I just, it's also it's a team sport in the way that, you put a like financial advisory team together, but you're not so much building a company, you're building a practice. So I sort of thought that like, I kind of felt after a bit that didn't really fit what I wanted to do in my career. So I tried the institutional side of things next, which was a technology focused investment bank called Pacific Crest. And that was a equity sales and trading desk, which is, a really cool seat on the institutional side to sort of see how things unfolded from like a capital raising and, research perspective, and cool environment. We were on the Facebook IPO. There were also like 40 banks on the Facebook IPO for reference, but that was just interesting to see, other IPOs like Workday, like really big sort of software institutions. And, one thing I noticed, this is a tech focused investment bank called Pacific Crest at the time, is, a lot of the activity was out on the West Coast in terms of where these firms were growing and what they were up to. And that, technology was kind of like an interest that had been stoked through school as like the world changed with the iPhone and everything. And I sort of, made it my mission that I wanted to be a part of that. And ultimately ended up moving out to San Francisco. I think I was 25 at the time with a friend of mine to break into the startup world.
And then you transitioned to media technology at AdCorp. What was that decision like?
Yeah, so AdRoll was the name of it. It was a
AdRoll, sorry.
No problem. It was a retargeting company at the time. So, everyone's pretty familiar with this technology now. But you visit a website, you go to another website, and you sort of see that product or image follow you around. Big business, of course. And it was my first sort of like nuts and bolts, how the internet works experience, and that was so valuable just to see like how website commerce works, what are the different verticals that sort of use this technology? How is that technology changing? One of AdRoll's like feature products at the time was leveraging Facebook inventory. So Facebook had this product called the Facebook Exchange, where they let a lot of external customers or companies come in and sort of advertise on their behalf. Then that changed when they built their mobile product. A lot of people forget this, but Facebook actually went public without a mobile advertising business. In fact, they were sort of like conceiving of it at the time of IPO, which is crazy to think about now. So when they went mobile, they sort of did that all on their own and built their own ad tech infrastructure. And that was really my first platform shift experience, as well as like dealing with customers from a B2B software standpoint as a lowly account manager. So that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. And then post AdRoll, you went to Liftoff Mobile.
Yep.
Enough said there. No, just kidding. Liftoff Mobile, where you had quite the career shift and quite the growth in career trajectory. Talk to me about how you went from customer success manager to director of strategic operations within 7 years.
Sure. So yeah, Liftoff was a tremendous experience, built out of a lot of luck. So AdRoll was kind of my first one, like diving into the world of tech and startups. Mm-hmm. We grew from 150 to 500 people in 18 months, which was just wild to go through. And it was really like a passenger seat experience. Like obviously I was out there doing my job, but from a leadership perspective, I was just sort of taking it all in. Right. I wasn't making many important decisions there. So at a point, I had gotten the opportunity with AdRoll to go to Sydney and help them sort of set up their initial office there. There was a landing team, and then I was one of the second or third teams that came after that. And I really liked that experience of kind of like helping grow something from scratch. So I was looking for something similar, and I was lucky enough just to get reached out to by one of the revenue leaders at the time. And so I ended up joining Liftoff as a 20th employee. And as any early stage employee knows, like there's just a lot of luck involved with that. But I certainly, I'd mentioned the mobile transition. This was a mobile focused advertising company. So I'd sort of seen that this transition was happening. So I was like aware of the platform shift that was happening. And I really joined because of the team that was there. And I think I talked to people a lot about this, like you sort of do the product, people, market, triangle to try to figure out sort of what to do and why. And for me, like what sold me was the team there was awesome. The early team, super talented. The founders of Liftoff, Harry Robertson, Phil Crosby, and Mark Ellis, like really talented people that I love learning from. And, ultimately I was one of the first customer success managers there. I ended up kind of leading that team eventually. We grew to hundreds of employees and, you know, major revenue growth, ultimately leading to a Blackstone acquisition in the spring of 2021, went through a merger. And then, my final role was at a subsidiary of the business that they acquired in called Jet Fuel, which was the sort of creator side of the business, which was cool to kind of do something different in my final chapter.
What was it like for you stepping into those larger roles with the company?
Yeah, I think, it's like change is, I think, a little bit painful for everybody. So hard is the short answer, but also like meaningful to do stuff when you're not quite ready. And those are obviously like the hardest parts are kind of the most gratifying in the end because you learn so much. And I think I've learned to know that when I'm feeling that kind of like tense discomfort, it's a sign that I'm growing. So just sort of sit in it a little bit and, learn as much as you can while you're going through it.
Was Liftoff your first experience with the startup world and the startup culture?
I would say probably, that was probably my first early stage experience. I had joined right after they raised their Series A, which I kind of laugh about now because they raised a $5 million Series A, which is now a seed round. So it's just sort of like, this is 2015, so just a little bit different in terms of the composition of that. But yeah, I think when you're 20 people, like you learn to do a little bit of everything. You do some work rearranging desks. You have to, there's not like a great automated expense process and everything like that. So you just have to learn to be adaptable. And I think like creating a culture of ownership at that early stage is so valuable. And then the downside is you sort of can't give that away once you've learned that. So it's hard for those people that have gone through ownership to then just be a passenger afterward.
And when did you fall in love with startups?
Ooh, I think at Admiral is the honest answer. And that was a credit to like that founding team too. And that environment, it was like also just a really fun experience. They did an incredible job creating not just a product and, finding obviously like a great fit in the market, but making sure that people were central to what they did. Like, they would have an all hands every Friday. Everyone would sort of pile into the common area where we had lunch and, they give out awards for like the employee of the week. They gave out an award to like the person who had, cleaned up the best. It was called the Golden Apron. Like stuff like that is just unique to a company is sometimes the most memorable stuff. And that was definitely where I caught the bug.
Did you ever?
I'm still friends with a lot of folks from my Admiral days. And I loved it.
Did you ever clean up the vest?
I never won the vest. People that know me well are probably not going to be surprised to hear that. But yeah, that's if I have one career regret, it's probably that I never won the vest. Yes.
And then talk to me about starting MGMT Boston.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I moved back to Boston, obviously I'm sort of like a mid-career person in the sense that I've been working for some time. And I was working remotely for my West Coast company. I wanted to learn about the Boston tech ecosystem. And I sort of sat down with some folks, like friends and friends of friends, just to kind of start that quote unquote networking process. And what I came to find is that it's actually like there's a major discoverability problem where if you're busy with your career and your life and, everything that you do, you just don't really keep a list of like great companies to know. You'll see like the Inc. 5000 list that'll come out. I think Built in Boston and VentureFizz do great jobs of sort of like covering the ecosystem broadly. But if you ask someone like, what are the 10 best growth stage companies in a given ecosystem? The only people that I think really give that some thought are going to be the investors that spend their time in that. So that was interesting. I was like, okay, so no one really keeps track of this. I'm sort of intellectually interested, but like, I also understand that it's hard work to do that. I'd ask people and they'd say HubSpot or Wayfair or Klaviyo, and those are great businesses, but they're also public companies. They're not like emerging Series A companies, for example. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. It sounds like someone could potentially do a better job trying to capture not like a ranking list, but just sort of this category in an ongoing way. And then the second thing, which I'm obviously very passionate about, is like, the up and coming folks in an organization. So those are kind of the team lead to director level folks. They do a lot of work and they also contribute a lot of value to the business, but they don't have the same brands that a executive, a founder, an investor have. Again, it's the same discoverability problem, but it's for people. And it's how do you kind of get them better exposure so that they get more opportunities. And I've sort of said, like, I don't really do the job search thing necessarily, but getting better opportunities in terms of meeting more people in the ecosystem, in terms of, maybe they could help advise informally earlier stage companies, or just learn about other companies that are doing interesting things in the ecosystem. Like, there's so much value to unlock through just better discoverability of companies and people. And that's kind of the intersection that I'm building.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the most amazing things that you've seen so far running at MGMT?
Yeah, I think like deep technical expertise, I think, is really cool to Boston. So, externally, some folks might say, well, it has a big B2B SaaS culture or health tech culture, and that's not as interesting as like the consumer culture that you might see on the West Coast. Maybe that's true. I don't have as much of an opinion on that, but I think what it really speaks to, which is interesting, is like deep technical talent that's here, and they're not as flashy in the same way maybe as another ecosystem, but there's a lot of talent here in Boston. The university system is obviously a big part of that, but just there's a lot of really experienced people that have built large companies that are here and doing really cool things.
And having seen hundreds of startups, what have you noticed for startups that succeed?
Ooh, that's harder. I think I've had a few conversations about this, and I think timing is a big part of it, honestly. Like, that is huge. I think, of course, you need great people. You need to be in a big growing market. You need to have a good product, but timing's part of it too. I think it's harder to succeed in 2023 than it was in 2020 or 2021. Maybe not the spring of 2020, but anyway, I think it's an endurance race is really the answer to that question. And it's like those who endure long enough to take advantage of the opportunities that come their way at various points, I think ultimately are the ones that are successful. If there was sort of a 10-point, plan and rubric to being successful in startup building, I think everyone would be aware of that and would sort of be executing on it.
And what about failures? Startups that have failed, what have you noticed?
Ultimately running out of time, right? In terms of not finding a big enough opportunity. I think creating like a continuous feedback loop is super important. One thing that obviously I've spent more time on is like, as an employee or someone looking to join a startup, capitalization is a big part of like understanding value. What I mean by that is like, if a company's overcapitalized and you're joining at a point in time where they may not grow to their valuation for 3 or 4 years, like, do you want to go on that journey? And you've seen obviously some like later stage startups shut down because, they sort of just couldn't grow into the commitments they'd made. Maybe there was like a debt service problem, or maybe, whatever their expenses, their run rate just wasn't long enough for them to land the plane. I think that's like one of the unique challenges of this rising interest rate environment is like the game has changed financially. So if you haven't been, lean and mean, how do you adjust to that new reality? Mm-hmm. I am not an FP&A expert, although I did do an interview with one a week ago. So that kind of helped shine a light on that again in terms of understanding like those unit economic analysis. You just have to be like super diligent about that.
And how have you seen the startup ecosystem change since the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank?
The short answer is not much.
Right.
I think it's a continuing tightening of like discipline across functional areas. Like you just need to know, you need to dot your I's, cross your T's, mind your P's and Q's. Like I don't actually really think it's changed that much. I think we've been on a continuing tightening, macroeconomically, and that's just led to like the need to be more disciplined operationally within your, 4 walls or 4 digital walls.
Absolutely.